Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for your interest in this workshop series today. My name is Frances Morton Chang, and I'm the Program Manager of York Region Senior Strategy Team, and we're pleased you're able to join us. Before we start our session, I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. We offer a land acknowledgement as a way to recognize the enduring presence and resilience of Indigenous peoples in this area for time immemorial. They are also a reminder that we are all accountable for these relationships and have a part to play in reconciliation. We acknowledge that York Region is located on the traditional territory of many Indigenous peoples, including the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and Métis peoples, and the treaty territories of the Haudenosaunee Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and Williams Treaties First Nations. Today, this area is home to many diverse Indigenous peoples, and we recognize their history, spirituality, culture, and stewardship of this land. We acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as our closest First Nation community. I will now turn it over to our Director of Senior Services to provide welcoming remarks and introductions.
Thank you, Frances, and welcome everyone. And thank you so much for your interest in this workshop series, Retiring on Low Income. My name is Julie Kazera, and I'm the Director of Senior Services in the Community and Health Services Department at York Region. I'm happy to be here today and welcome all of you and our speaker, John Stapleton, social policy expert from Open Policy Ontario, who will be sharing his wealth of knowledge over the next 5 weeks. I want to introduce you to members of our York Region Senior Strategy team that you now see on your screen. Frances Morton Chang, whom you just met. Frances will be the moderator for this session on the screen. Senior Program Analyst, Judy Coltis-McLeod and Michael Sharondoff, and Data Analyst student, Angela Richards. So a little bit of background. In March 2024, Regional Council approved the 2024 to 2027 York Region Plan to support seniors. These sessions align with one of our actions in the plan to communicate information on healthy aging, to raise awareness with seniors, caregivers, and staff to help seniors stay healthy and connected. It's important for people to understand the benefits available and how to access them, as this will support seniors to age in the right place, connect to services, and stay healthier longer. Today's session is titled, What Do Seniors Get? You will hear about the benefits for older adults living in Ontario, including Canadian Pension Plan, CPP, Old Age Security, OAS, and Guaranteed Income Supplement, GIS, and lastly, the Guaranteed Annual Income Supplement, otherwise known as GAINS, and how to make most of these benefits. And as Frances noted, we have time at the end for your questions, answers, and clarifications. It is my pleasure to now introduce John Stapleton, our distinguished presenter, who will be leading the workshop session over the next 5 weeks. John Stapleton is a social policy expert and over 30 years of experience, including working in the Ontario government, in the Ministry of Community and Social Services. John has played a pivotal role in shaping social assistance policy and poverty reduction strategies, and is currently principal at the social policy consultancy, Open Policy Ontario. John has been sharing his depth of knowledge of the income security system to many different audiences throughout the career. And just to mention a few of the highlights, he was a member of the Federal Minister Duclos Advisory Committee on Poverty Reduction, the Minister of Community and Social Services Advisory Group on Social Assistance and Reform, and City of Toronto's Advisory Group on Poverty Reduction. John has also published op-eds in the Globe and Mail, National Post, and the Toronto Star. Through his consultancy in Open Policy Ontario, John provides training and resources to help organizations and individuals navigate retiring on low income. John has delivered this workshop series through the Toronto Public Library, so we are taking his opportunity to share his experience with York Region seniors, pre-seniors, and caregivers. The goal of these sessions is to inform seniors, pre-seniors, and caregivers about retiring on low income to be better prepared to live with a low income in retirement. Over the next coming weeks, John will deliver 4 more sessions, 2-hour virtual sessions covering the following content. Session 2, Understanding the Personal Income Tax System. Session 3, Protecting Your Retirement Income. Session 4, Coming to Canada and Leaving Canada. Session 5, Tax Credits and Benefits for Seniors and People with Disabilities. So, I turn it over to John to take us through his presentation. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much, Julie. That was quite an introduction. I hope I can live up to it. This is in 5 sessions. I deliver this this seminar really in 2 different ways. I have a very quick 2-hour session where I go over everything. And then I received requests on a number of occasions to break it up into various sessions of the same amount of time. So over the next weeks, we'll have 5 2-hour sessions, and really have found that it's a really good way to take on these things slowly, so that everybody is brought along as we go through the material. So without any further ado, let's move to the next slide, please. What I want to give you here, first of all, talk through some statistics that we got from the last census. And what we've done for Canada is divide all of our seniors into 10 groups, and 10 equal groups according to their earnings and their income from various different sources. And so what you see on the left side of the graph in income decile 1 is the people with the very lowest income, but it's 10% of seniors. Each one of the columns is 10% of seniors. So we have the next column, which is 10% of seniors, and you can see their median income is higher than the first one. And then the third group, and the fourth group, and the fifth group. And so the fifth and sixth groups are the groups where you'll find seniors who are in the mainstream, so to speak. Then when we get into the 7th group and the 8th and the 9th group, we see people whose income comes from different sources than it comes from for people on lower income. And finally, when we get to the richest seniors, the richest 10%, you can see that they look very, very different than the bottom group that has the lowest income. So let's just look at that high income group for a couple of seconds. First of all, they work the most, even though they're seniors, more than a quarter of them work. And you can see that they get 35% of their income from private retirement pensions, that sort of thing. But they have a considerable amount of their income, 27%, coming from investments. And that's not just the assets, but that's the income flowing from their investments. So then when we get down to the government sources of income, that only provides them with 3% of their income, and you won't find any of them getting the guaranteed income supplement simply because they make too much money. They only get 8% of their income from the Canada Pension Plan, and they receive hardly any government transfers because those transfers are income tested and their income would be too high. So let's travel over right to the very to the left part of the screen, and you can see that very few seniors in the very lowest income actually work. And if actually you don't see it showing up at all really until the fourth group. And so you have very little pension earnings either in the first three groups. As you can see that they're at 3%, 2%. But then once we start talking about old age security and the guaranteed income supplement, the first group gets 50% of their income from old age security and another 13% from the guaranteed income supplement and a high amount, 22%, from the Canada Pension Plan and QPP. And then as we move into the second, what they call deciles, and that means the second 10% group of people, you can see that they actually receive more of their income from the guaranteed income supplement. And finally, in the third group, we see the largest effect of the guaranteed income supplement, which is 29%. Now, since the guaranteed income supplement is an income tested program, as you get into the fourth column, you see that the guaranteed income supplement starts to wane. It starts to be less of a source of income, and that's because the income test would take them off the GIS finally until you get to the sixth group, and they're only getting 2% of their income from the guaranteed income supplement. But you can see that in the sixth group, they're starting to see more and more income from private pensions from their work, and private pensions tend to be higher, and that's why you see more and more income come from private pensions. So the income situation, let's say, of the richest group and maybe the five richest group is very, very different than what you see in the first five groups, who have the lowest income only going up to about $29,000 to $30,000. And so the viewpoint of seniors and people who support seniors and governments is very, very different when they look at the income profile of various seniors. And what we're really here about talking about over these 5 weeks is the seniors in those first five groups. We are going to really be spending a lot of our time on the guaranteed income supplement, which is not a taxable income. It is not taxed by the federal or provincial governments, but it is the largest single program for low-income people. I'll just say one note on why you see the guaranteed income supplement is the highest amongst the third column. And that's because you have people, especially immigrants to Canada, who would possibly not be eligible for the full amount of the guaranteed income supplement, or apply for it, or do it through or apply through their taxes. And so that's where you see the greatest sense of it. So we're going to go on to the next slide now. And I think one thing I should tell you is that the real golden days for low income amongst seniors was actually back in the 90s, where you can see that poverty amongst and low income amongst seniors was way down to about 4%. That incredible achievement that we had starting back, first of all, in the 50s, when we first brought in old age, what they called OAP, or old age pensions. Then we got the Canada Pension Plan in 1966, and we got the Guaranteed Income Supplement in 1969 and 1970. And the effect of that was to take almost all seniors out of poverty by the mid-90s. What we then see using the low income after tax, low income means half the median income. So I'll make numbers up. If the median income is $70,000, then half the median would be $35,000. So that would be by family size. And you can see that seniors, because their benefits are generally linked to price inflation, which is the Canada with the consumer price index that we all call inflation, that's developed and produced by the Bank of Canada, you can see that with the low income measure, which compares seniors to all parts of the population, that we're seeing more and more seniors living at lower levels compared to the rest of the population. So the low income line I prefer to see as what I would call an inequality line, whereas the market basket measure, which is the official poverty line of Canada, is more of a true poverty line. And the market basket measure shows far fewer seniors in poverty, whereas the low income inequality line called LIM is starting to show more seniors, getting up to about 15% or so in poverty in the post-pandemic period. So let's look at the next slide, please. And what this is showing, that we see that we're starting to look at men who are in low income. That's the solid blue line, the sliver line there. Men not in low income. The next line in the dark red is women in low income. And this is all people over 65. And then finally, we have women not in low income. So one of the very, very first things that you can see is that there is a feminization or a feminized poverty. There are more low income women who fall below the low income line, and fewer men who fall below that. Now, there's lots of reasons. We could spend a day talking about that. So we won't. We'll just say that women live longer, and therefore living longer means that there's, especially if they run out of funds, that you're going to have more in poverty. Women still make less than men, so their opportunities to have savings and pension is going to be lower. And even in senior jobs, many of our seniors are working. Men tend to make more money in that area. So we are seeing that when we talk about retirement and low income, there is an emphasis that we must make on women living in poverty. Next slide, please. And I should give a shout out to, when you're looking at the bottom of the slide, you'll see the name of R. Marinan, who spent 3 years with me during the pandemic. And Richard Marinan is a data analyst and a geospatial analyst par excellence. I refer to him as a genius, and so I've been lucky to have him with me for this. So age 65 and over population by low income status, we find looking at those various lines, that the first line is in a family and low income, and there's not, and you can see that is a sliver, and it's growing a bit towards the 2020s. The next one is in a family and not low income. So again, it's really important to point out that most of our seniors are not in low income, and I will describe what low income means in this context. Mainly, it means eligibility for the guaranteed income supplement, and I'll take you through that in a minute. Then we have the group that is not in a family. In other words, generally living by themselves, living independently, and in low income. And you can see how in 1996 that purple sliver really went dramatically downward, and now we're starting to see people who are not in a family and low income, according to that low income measure, is starting to increase, and has really increased markedly in the new millennium. And then finally, the mauve line, the light purple, is not in a family and not low income. Again, so you see the largest group is in a family and not low income. And you can see the various trends there. So persons in an economic family live as couple, lone parent, or with relatives, and persons not in an economic family live alone or with unrelated persons only. And one of the things that I think we'll be concentrating on through the 5 weeks is especially women, older women living alone and living in private rental properties are amongst the seniors that are in the most poverty and the people that we need to, as social policy people, we need to worry about the most. Next slide, please. So here we have, when we look at gender again, it's really important to look at gender. We can see that the poverty level started out higher amongst women. They got down to about 5% in the mid 90s, and then they started to rise again. And you can see that men have consistently done better over a period of almost 50 years. You can see the numbers here, and it's really important to say low income and poverty amongst seniors is a gender issue and a consistent gender issue and an issue over time. So let's move on to the next slide, please. And again, if we look at family status, which is important to do, is remembering that persons in an economic family live as a couple, lone parent, or with relatives. So you have that that feel of the family as we go along. And you can also see that persons not in an economic family live alone or with unrelated persons only. And we're seeing more seniors living with unrelated persons. You've probably noticed that articles in the newspapers talking about older seniors who have really nice accommodation and they have spare rooms and might live next or near to a university or a school. And we're starting to see how social service agencies and other agencies are trying to match up seniors with older students, especially when they're in that unrelated group. And you can see in a family the light brown or beige in those columns. You can see that is showing up in inequality. The low-income measure, not in a family number of persons, and you can see that that's one of the things that we're really worrying about now is seniors that are living in isolation. There's been many, many different surveys of seniors that have shown that that the group that is not in a family, people that are living alone or with unrelated persons, we are seeing that more of them, as you can see quite dramatically here, are in low income. So let's move on to the next slide. And so in the Toronto Census Metropolitan Area, which of course includes York Region, and looking at that by gender or by sex in 2021, you can see that couples with no children or one family household are in that 44% for men and 31% for women. We can see that at the group that is living alone, you can see that far fewer men are living alone, 14% over 65. And then when we look at higher age groups, we see that men living alone is 13% up to 65 to 74, and 75 to 84, it's lower, and 85 plus, it's a small sliver. When we move on to looking at women, we find that and I especially want to concentrate on the pink or light red group, and that is that women living alone already starts out almost double the number of men living alone. A lot of that has to do with age expectations, demographics. Women live longer than men. And so are even those who were not originally single or hadn't been single for years, the people in couples, the women are out surviving the men. And of course, from an income point of view, that's going to show them up. But this particular slide is not showing poverty. It's just talking living arrangements. So look at women over 65, 26% living alone. And then when we start to look at 85% plus, we're seeing 42% of all women 85 and over in our region, which includes Toronto, York region, Oakville, Peel, Halton, etc. But we're finding over 85 that 42% are living alone. And that is, and especially when you think of affordability, when you think of rent, when you think of the cost of food, then that becomes more and more of an issue and puts real pressures on our income security system. So let's move on from here to the next slide. And when we look at, now we're looking over to poverty rates, we're going to the market basket measure. And market basket measure actually shows fewer seniors in poverty than the low income measure. Why? Because the market basket measure actually looks at the value of seniors' homes and their living arrangements and attributes a value to that. And so when they look at seniors who are living mortgage-free and seniors who own their own homes, they're attributing a value to that. And the MBM also attributes a value to seniors who are living in subsidized housing. So rent geared to income housing, they attribute a value to that. And in attributing that value, we see that the market basket measure shows far fewer people in poverty. But if we look at look at all age 65 and over, and we look at the poverty rates, we see the highest poverty rate on people who are non-family only. So in other words, they're living alone or they're living with people who are not part of their family. And we're seeing that, we saw that figure at 2015. And again, you see it in amongst males, it's highest, and in females, it's slightly lower. Now, you're probably looking at this particular slide and you're saying to yourself, why are things better in 2020? Well, the reason that things are better in the 2020 census is because the census was done right at the beginning part of the COVID-19 pandemic, and Canada brought in over $100 billion in various measures to help people weather the pandemic, to stay indoors, stay safe, etc. Some of the money that was provided was to people with disabilities of all ages. It was a $600 extra amount. Additional amount was given to the guaranteed income supplement and to old age pensions during that period. And then we have to remember that, about a quarter of all seniors work, and the seniors who were put out of work because of the pandemic were receiving very large programs like the CERB, the CERB, as we call it, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, and then the CRB that came after that, which was the Canada Recovery Benefit. And those programs didn't end until the fall of 2022. And so we really saw an effect on the incomes and the poverty levels of seniors during that period, simply because those programs spent so much money. The CERB and CRB itself spent about $85 billion, which is just an almost unheard of amount in terms of comparing it to the rest of our income security system. Our income security system right now spends about $225 billion on all programs, EI, CPP, Ontario Works, ODSP, you name it, workers' comp. And the CERB added about a 1/3 increase to all of those programs and the various benefits that we had. So that's why poverty went down in that period. But it's really interesting to see how poverty went down for seniors also. So let's move on to the next slide. Now, here's one of the most important slides for York Region and for the Toronto region, as we call it, the Toronto CMA. What does CMA mean? It means the Census Metropolitan Area of Toronto. And what you can see when you look at Canada, 70% of our seniors are non-immigrants. 30% are immigrants. That just completely reverses once you get to the Toronto area. And what you see that only 29% of our seniors, everybody over 65 as of the census in 2021, shows that 71% of all our seniors in the Census Metropolitan Area of Toronto are immigrants. Now, what's interesting about that when we start to talk about income security is that our income security programs is based on the length of residency in Canada. So very newer immigrants to Canada are going to receive less in our old age programs, less in our Canada pension, and they have less opportunity to save. And so the Toronto region looks very different in many ways than the rest of Canada. You can see the only city that's even close is the one on the bottom, the row there, Vancouver, which showing that 59% of their seniors are immigrants. But for the rest of Canada, you can see that places like Halifax, Montreal, Ottawa, Gatineau, Winnipeg, all show that most of the seniors are non-immigrants. So the income security system, because it's based on the length of your residency, is very, very different in our neck of the woods here in the Toronto region. Even extends to the extent of the tax-free savings account, for example. Because you can only use your contribution room is in the amount of time that you've spent in Canada since 2009. So there's, of course, it's going to extend to the Canada Pension Plan. You will have worked for perhaps less of a period in Canada. So CPP eligibility, old age security eligibility is based on living in Canada. And we're going to get into that, especially in the session on coming to Canada and leaving Canada. It's going to be very important, but we'll get into a bit of it here, and then we'll really start to talk about it in the other weeks. So let's move on to the next slide, please. So there has been some changes in the old age security system in the last 3 years or so. And now what we're seeing is though I think most people know that people who are 75 over, that the Trudeau government brought in a 10% increment to people who are over 75 and who are fully eligible for old age security. So it's $72.57 higher at $800 a month. And I also want to point out to you something about indexation, is that we had a significant increase with CPI. Old age security and the guaranteed income supplement is indexed quarterly, but it's based on on a formula that inflation has to reach a certain level in order to bump up the old age security and GIS. And so some of you will see, if you collect old age security, you'll see that it didn't go up between April to June 2024 as we'd come out of a period of very high inflation. And then we moved down, and we didn't get enough inflation from April to June 2024 in order to increase old age security and GIS during that period. And I'll also say, just on a note of humor, but very selfishly, is that I try to change all these slides and all the information I give every quarter. And when I see a whole quarter where I don't have to change any of the figures, I have less work to do. But that's particular to me. Now, the provincial government doubled the gains program twice. They did it once during the early part of the pandemic back in 2021. And then I guess they liked the idea of it going up during the pandemic period. And this is one of the very few areas where the governments have taken something that they've done in the pandemic and gone back to it. We don't have CERB or CRB or any of these other pandemic programs, but the Ontario government doubled gains back in 2021, and now they have done that again over the last year, and they've also indexed it. And so what we're seeing is a gains payment of $87 a month. And I think another important thing, of course, to look at is that our minimum wage was increased to $17.20 on October 1st, 2024. So we've seen very regular minimum wage increases, and it has a particular effect in terms of whether seniors should work a lot, work at all, or work a lot. And I'm going to cover that in one of the subsequent presentations. But minimum wage increases are important. They've been going well ahead of inflation since back in 2007, and especially for seniors working and retiring on a low income. Generally, seniors on low incomes tend to work more towards the minimum wage level than higher wages. So let's move on from here. So let's get into the meat and potatoes here, and let's think about what the amounts that people are getting and remember, you'll have this presentation, but these amounts are, because they tend to change quarterly for old age security and the guaranteed income supplement. Canada Pension Plan changes yearly with inflation, with price inflation, and the gains program has just only very recently been indexed, and I think they're going to index that on a yearly basis. And they've changed some of the rules too on gains, and we'll get into that throughout the presentations. And in this case, generally speaking, what seniors get in Ontario, what are all their income sources? And in no particular order, because we could go any order, but let's start with the Canada Pension Plan, which came into in 1966. And the Canada Pension Plan is what's called, it's a benefit that is funded through a payroll tax. So for anybody who's ever worked as an employee and received a T4, you'll know that you make mandatory contributions to the Canada Pension Plan for the period that you work. And so because of that payroll tax, the only other payroll tax that we have on our T4s, of course, is the employment insurance program. But the Canada Pension Plan is something that you pay into as an employee. You can also pay into it as a self-employed person. But if you paid into it, you can get a pension. And it's important to know that you can get a monthly pension as high as $873 per month and 34 cents at age 60 if in fact you have worked all throughout the through your working life. Generally speaking, 35 to 40 years, you can maximize your pension, but you also have to pay in at the highest level that you can pay in. So generally speaking, you have to make about 60,000 or so, and you have to work your whole working lifetime to get that $873.34. Now that's a lower monthly benefit than you would get at 65. And at age 65, you can get a benefit of $1,364.60 a month. That's the maximum that you can get if you're 65. So if you decide to get your CPP early, they're going to pay you less because they're paying you more money between age 60 and 65. If you wait till you're 65, then you can get $1,364.60. And as you may know, you can defer your CPP until age 70 or any year up to that, 66, 67, 68, 69, and at 70, generally speaking, you will get a CPP pension that's 36% higher, just like the one at 60 is 36% lower. The reason I don't talk about going to the age 70 is that's generally speaking for people who are on higher incomes who could afford to defer their pension till their age 70. Lower income people, we don't want people who are missing meals, for example, or having real hardship deferring their CPP because they're going to get more at a later date. But people who don't need it immediately or have other pension sources could defer it to age 70. Old age security, that's the large program that goes to about 7.8 million Canadian seniors. Most people that are 65 plus get this. There are also some benefits called the allowance for low-income spouses who are not yet 65. I'm not going to spend too much time on that unless there's questions, but old age security right now is up to $727.67 per month. And both CPP and old age security are taxable benefits. So in other words, you will get in the mail, let's hope the strike is over soon, but you'll get in the mail early in the new year. You will get from the government, they'll send you your CPP T4, T4A as it's called, and you will also get an old age security T4A. And these are both taxable benefits, so you have to add them to your taxable income. If you're low income, you probably still won't pay any tax after you've finished all your filling out your tax form or somebody else who does it for you. But if you're higher income, certainly CPP and old age security are going to result in you paying higher taxes. The guaranteed income supplement, alternatively, is not a taxable benefit. It's a tax reportable benefit. In other words, when you get your T4 OAS slip in the mail in the new year, you will have to put the amount of, it will tell you the amount of GIS you received, and you have to report that on your tax form. Now, you report that on your tax form because the guaranteed income supplement can affect your other refundable credits like your Trillium and like your probably not too many people can, the child benefit, GST credits, that sort of thing. So there is an effect, but it's not taxable in its own right. So CPP and OAS are taxable, and the guaranteed income supplement is reportable but not taxed in itself. It's backed out before you get to that bottom line where the government decides whether you're going to pay the money or whether you're going to get money back. Now, the guaranteed annual income system, one of the big questions that I get all the time is, how do I apply for that? I'm low income and I want to apply for the GAINS program. Well, you can't. The GAINS program works off of the guaranteed income supplement. As long as you apply for the guaranteed income supplement, then you get the guaranteed annual income supplement because you're low income. If you are very, very low income, and I mean you have to get income of about $4,000 a year alone or lower as a single person, yes, you heard me right, $4,000 a year, then you will automatically receive the GAINS payment. Okay. And the GAINS payment is from Ontario, and it piggybacks on the GIS program. And because of that, you don't have to put in a separate application. And in fact, you can't put in a separate application for the GAINS program. Often I've seen seniors on many occasions who the only reason they know they got the GAINS payment is that they will get a bank statement and they'll see this odd amount for someone up to $87 a month, and they're wondering where that came from, and that's the GAINS payment. This is generally people who have very low income. So who has very low income? People who did not work substantially through their lifetime, meaning that their Canada pension plan is enough to, remember I said $4,000 a year. So for example, if you received $12,000 a year in CPP, just by way of example, you would be ineligible for GAINS. Now, seniors also get income from savings. And their savings is money that, generally speaking, they can put into their bank account or invest in any way that they choose. But importantly, two important ways for seniors to save before they become senior citizen is in an RRSP. And the registered retirement savings plan is a tax instrument that came into being in 1957 in Canada. So it's been around for a long time. Most people know what they are. And it allows you a deduction on the income. And the whole idea behind it is put money into an RRSP while you're working and your income is high. Once you've retired, your income will be lower. And therefore, when you take out money from the RRSP, then you'll be taxed on a lower rate. And then there is the tax-free savings account. Now, the tax-free savings account came into being in 2009, so it was a late comer to the benefits and the various different savings instruments that seniors can use. And the TFSA is now at the point where it's very, very close to $100,000 that you can put into a TFSA. And of course, a TFSA, you have to have lived in Canada, breathing Canadian air, generally speaking, legally, and be here as a permanent resident or as citizen to put money into a TFSA. And there's a yearly amount that you can put in. RRSPs, on the other hand, you can put 18% of your salary is called your RRSP room, and that room increases as you work. And if you put money into the RRSP and get the deduction, then your RRSP room goes down. So some people who are very good at putting money into their RRSP will have no room left, whereas often we see low-income people who haven't been able to afford to put money into an RRSP have a lot of room in their RRSP when they turn 65. Now, I'm laying the groundwork here for a lot of other things that I'm going to be saying throughout the 5 weeks. Generally speaking, for low-income people, you are much better off to put money into a tax-free savings account rather than to an RRSP as you're coming up to 65. If you're low income, And the reason for that is that we're introducing this very soon is the idea that the guaranteed income supplement has a clawback. What a clawback means is it's income tested. And our money that comes out of an RRSP is subject to the clawback. Money that you take out of a TFSA is not. Let me say that again, because it's very, very important. Money that you take out of an RRSP will be clawed back at least 50% by the guaranteed income supplement. So it will lower your guaranteed income supplement most of the time up to age 65. But money that you take out of a TFSA after 65 is not clawed back. Many of you will know that that all RRSPs, and this applies to every one of us who lives in Canada and has an RRSP, it will turn into something called a registered retirement income fund at age 71. I've had many people saying, well, how do I get out of that? Can I just keep my money in an RRSP forever? No, your RRSP automatically turns into a RIF at age 71, and the government starts to force you to take dribs and drabs of money out of your RIF at age 71, whether you want to or not, and that money is taxable. The government's point of view, of course, is you got a deduction when you put it in, and now you're taking it out, and now you got to pay taxes on it. So that's why the TFSA, you don't get a deduction when you put money in, but when you take it out, neither do you have any taxation or any form of clawbacks. So the TFSA is becoming extremely popular, and it's becoming popular because it has that feature of being able to save money inside it that's not taxed. That's the same as the RRSP, but it also has this huge benefit of not being subject to any sort of tax or clawback when you take it out. So what's the next form of income that we have is private pensions. Basically, that means a pension from where you worked. People have, generally speaking, that do get pensions will have a defined benefit pension, which you will know the amount that you are going to get. Most governments, big companies will have defined benefit pensions. And then there is the defined contribution type of pension, which your benefit is going to depend on what's happening in the markets and whether the investments are doing well or not. Whereas in the case of the defined benefit pension, although it is affected by the markets in some way, it's generally speaking, it's a benefit that's defined in advance. Then the other form of income for seniors get generally monthly is the large cohort of seniors who are now working for wages. And when I say other, I mean we have seniors who will be quote unquote working in air quotes. But what I'm talking about is where they're receiving an honorarium of some type. There's a lot of people who volunteer, work in church basements, volunteer for nonprofits, even volunteering for governments. Municipalities actually have lots of volunteers who work in various types of programs, and they receive honorariums. Why do they receive honorariums? They receive them because they need to cover their expenses. If you go into a place and work in a church basement or you work in a food program, often you will get an honorarium for your transportation and, of course, your food that you have to consume outside of home, which is going to be more expensive. But honorariums are also a form of income for seniors. The reason I'm mentioning earnings and honorariums is honorariums have very important, outsized importance for low income seniors, and we're going to see why that's the case as we go on. Now, I think what we're going to do here is just stop for a second and see if there's any clarifying questions. When I do this in person, I should tell you that I say there's good news and bad news. One is that the good news is that I'll take your questions, and the second one is I'll decide what a clarifying question is, because sometimes people will ask about things that's very personal to them. So, Frances?
Well, John, the questions have been coming in and they're really good. So I'm going to start with the first one. We've been asked, is there a maximum or minimum number of years one has to contribute to avail of the CPP?
Generally speaking, 40 years. There is a general rule that there is, and it applies to old age security, and we're going to see that as we go on, and especially for immigrants, is that what counts is the 47 years between your 18th and 65th birthday. Okay? So you can get full old age security if you have spent living in Canada, breathing in Canadian air legally. You can receive full old age security even if you haven't, if you moved to Canada, say when you were 25. So you would still have 40 years at 65. And the same, generally speaking, is true of CPP. You know, there's other things like overtime, people putting in lesser, different amounts, women who take time out of the labor force. But generally speaking, everything maximizes at the 40-year point, although it can be earlier than the 40-year point. But once you've got your 40 years in, and once you start taking the Canada Pension Plan, then that amount is frozen at that amount. Of course, it's indexed after that, but you can't contribute any more to get a higher pension, is what I'm trying to say. So general rule 40, but it can be less than that under certain circumstances, and it can certainly it can be more than that for people who are working part-time.
So John, just to continue on that, the participant also mentioned a lesser time than 40 years. They said, if I commence contributing to CPP in 2003 and I plan to retire in 2026, you know, what would be my CPP? But what I'm seeing there is that it's under 40 years. It's a little over 20 some years.
Yeah, 23 years. You're looking at generally speaking, 23/40. So in other words, a little over half of your CPP. But you also got to look at the rate that you're contributing. CPP has something that, if you read the business sections of newspapers, you'll see this term called YMPE. And YMPE is called Yearly Maximum Pensionable Earnings. So that tends to be in the $60,000 range. There's an amount above which that you can't contribute anymore to CPP that maxes out once you reach this yearly maximum pensionable earnings, which changes each year. It's about 60,000 right now. So somebody who has 23 years in the labor force, you'd also have to look at the what portion of the yearly maximum pensionable earnings that they're living in. And in fact, we're going to have an example that we call Tina that's coming up further in the slides. It gives an example of a woman who did not contribute to CPP for the total time period, and also was not paying in at the maximum amount. And I always say there's going to be a bit of a test, but nobody's going to mark you on this. You're going to mark yourself. So,
John, the next question, thank you for that. The next question is, if somebody passes away, so how much of a survivor's CPP from a spouse would continue for someone to receive after the person passes?
Survivor's benefit is going to be totally based on you can get survivor's benefits, I think, at age 35. And it's going to be based on the contributions. Again, what level of contribution was made to the CPP, and so not only just the level, but how long the person worked. I mean, just anecdotally, I remember working out a formula for a woman who had been married to two men over her lifetime. One passed away early, and she had a son by the first one, and then another son by the second one. And I can tell you, I'm not going. I will stay away from saying what the exact amount is going to be, because those situations can get very complex. You had different people earning different amounts over different times, and so you really. The good part about it is that CPP is very good. If you go into the federal government website, your account, your CPP account, they will give you a statement of how much money that you're going to be able to receive in retirement benefits, based on some assumptions. On survivors, because you're talking about the death of a spouse, and it can generally be speaking in terms of family members, absent divorce and family change of various sorts. I'd advise the person to get in contact with CPP, give them their full particulars, and then they'll get the various amounts. So it's quite variable based on contribution, period of time of contribution, and of course the age of the survivors and how long they're going to get that.
Okay. So we have a number of questions still in, and we're at the 1 hour mark. So I'm going to ask a few more, but I think some of them are going to be answered in your future slides. So one person made a comment, I'll do a couple more, said that they hadn't started their CPP and OAS yet at age of 68. And I think the inference is there perhaps an option to defer CPP and OAS, and what those implications of such a decision might be?
Yeah, I touched on it briefly when I just at the top of the slide that's on right now, that if you take CPP early, of course, you're going to get less per month than you would at 65, because you're starting your payout early. And of course, if you wait till age 70, or wait, again, you can wait to 66, 67, 68, 69, or 70. At 70, it maximizes. So there's no sense waiting to 71 because you're not going to get any more money, or 72. So for the person who's 68 years old, they should be making that decision over the next couple of years. Especially because you don't want to go beyond age 70, because you're not going to get any more money waiting, and you're simply losing a monthly income from both of those sources if you wait past that. So I don't know how close they are to their 69th birthday, but I'd say it's something to think about pretty quickly, because the government takes its own time getting those in, and now we got a mail strike. So anyways, it's a bit of dark humor, I guess. But generally speaking, you get 36% more. You get about 0.6 per month. If you're mathematically or arithmetically inclined, you get a little more than 0.5% per month for each month that you wait, moving past your 65th birthday. So that's at your 70th birthday, your OAS is going to be 36% higher, and your CPP is going to be 36% higher. So maybe it's a good time to just mention that there's a great deal of uncertainty in terms of waiting, and the various pros and cons of doing it, because there is an answer to a question that's extremely important in all our lives, and that is the day that we're going to leave the planet. And none of us know when that day is, but interestingly enough, none of us wants to know that date. I have never run into a person who, generally speaking, wants to know the date they're going to leave the planet. So it's really important to look at such things as your health, your income, your needs. Again, I said that don't be waiting to apply for your CPP if you're missing meals. Or you can't pay the rent. So those are important things. So if you've already waited till you're 68, you're on and you're still here with us, which is also a good thing. Then you have a decision to make over the next year and a half or so. If you want to maximize it at that point, in which case, if you live a good long life, you're going to make on the deal. And if you don't, their CPP at age 65, asking the questions are, listen, are you generally in good health? Yes, 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 nothing chasing me. Question number 2, do you need the money? No, don't need it at all. That'd be just money that I build up in my bank account. And is there anybody else that needs it? Or, your lifestyle and all that sort of thing. That same person passed away a month after their 65th birthday. And of course, that means they didn't get any of that CPP between 60 and 65. On the other hand, if you're in good health and you don't need the money, then it's quite legitimate and in fact quite advantageous to wait till age 70, because once you're in your early 80s, you'll be ahead of the game on the deal. It's just a question that when we plan, we should always plan for a good long life. I'm not a financial planner, but financial planners will tell you to plan for a good long life so that you don't outlive your money. And if you're in a position to defer, then that's a good thing. Although the emphasis of these 5 sessions is on low income retirement. And if you're waiting till you're 68 or 70, you're generally speaking not in a low income situation, because you would have needed the money and you would have applied for it already.
So John, thank you for that. That was really helpful. I see that we have some really great questions about GIS, which you're about to talk about.
Yes.
RIFs and about child rearing provisions. So I think in the interest of time, we'll move on to the next slides and hold those questions for the folks that are online to the end, because I think some of those questions are going to be answered along the way in your slides, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Okay, I'll slip off and
we'll get to the next slide. Yeah. So first of all, I'll just say, don't go back to the previous slide, but I will say that slide that we're talking just about all the different sources that seniors can get. So I said I would explain to you what low income is. And generally speaking, will you be eligible for OAS and will you be eligible for GIS? And we have a concept when we explain the guaranteed income supplement of what we call a break-even point. Now, you don't have to memorize the phrase break-even point, but I'm going to tell you, if you're a single person and your income from all sources, except for old age security itself. So in other words, you have money coming out in interest payments, you might have a pension payment, you might have some other payments that come to you, dividends of various sorts. If you're a single person and your income from all those other sources except OAS is less than $22,000, then you will, 22,056, you are going to get some GIS. However, if your income from all those sources, not counting old age security, which is about between $7,000 and $8,000 a year, if it's above 22,000, like your CPP and your company pension and your money from an investment or a dividend comes to higher than $22,056, then you're going to get no GIS. Okay. So above 22,056. So in a sense, for seniors, you can almost look at that number of 22,056 as a type of poverty line. It's a low poverty line, but it's an interesting way to look at it. Now, a couple where both are getting old age security, that number moves to 29,136 per year. So again, if they have income that's below 29,136, not counting their old age security, this in this case for the couple, so it's both their OAS, then they are going to get some GIS. If they have no income at all, then they're going to get full GIS. And if their income is over 29,136, then they, without OAS being counted, then they're going to get no GIS. And the planning that you do when you are eligible for GIS versus the planning when you are not eligible for GIS is almost between a difference between night and day. And we'll be dealing that with in at least 3 of the sessions that we're doing, including this one. Now, then you have a couple where only one partner getting OAS and the other partner is under 65. And when I try to see everybody, when I do a personal in-person presentation of that, I give the example of a 66-year-old woman with a 19-year-old husband. And if I get lots of laughs, I know that people are paying attention. And if I don't, then I realize they're looking at their phones or something. But so if you get the couple with one partner getting OAS and the other partner is under 65, so they normally be like 58 and 65, for example, then their income for the purposes of whether they'll get GIS will be under 52,848. And then finally, a couple with one partner getting old age security and the other partner is getting 60 to 64, who's age 60 to 64 and getting the what's called allowance. It used to be called spouse's allowance. Now they just call it the allowance. Then that number is 40,800. So again, your income is below that amount of any of those amounts, depending on your family configuration and your your family makeup. There's different amounts. Below it, you get GIS. Above it, you don't. If you're just a little bit below those amounts, based on your family configuration, you'll get very little GIS. If your income is very low, I have done presentations, for example, at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, where I find people that for various reasons have not worked, have not gotten CPP over their lifetime, and they will get almost the full guaranteed income supplement, whereas most people, because they're going to get some CPP, they're going to suffer the clawback and therefore get partial guaranteed income supplement. So we can move on to the next slide now. So the tax back on the guaranteed income supplement is a nominal. Let's say what you'll read in information circulars is that the tax back is 50% on the guaranteed income supplement. Now, if you look at the real rate of tax back on the guaranteed income supplement, because there's various different small programs, and I almost hesitate to get into them, but there is some changes that both Mr. Harper and Mr. Trudeau made that increase the rate of GIS, but at the same time, they upped the amount of money that was recovered. So the real rate of tax back on the guaranteed income supplement is now 59%, except for earnings. And earnings, if you ask me what earnings are, earnings is money where you have on your pay stub, you'll have a payroll tax of CPP, EI, and some income tax taken off, and you get a T4. When you get other income from other sources, your tax slip will be called a T4A. So if the information slip you get from the Canada Revenue Agency is a T4, then your GIS clawback amount is 50%. And if the information slip you get from CRA is anything other than a T4, in other words, a T4A or a T5, then you're going to find, generally speaking, or T3, you're going to, generally speaking, find that your recovery rate on GIS is 59%. So where is the GIS clawback occurring? If you take money out of an RRSP, you're going to have the 59% effective tax back. Any sort of company pension or any other pension that you're regularly receiving, there's going to be a GIS clawback of 59%. Canada Pension Plan, you can't avoid it. It doesn't do any good to try to avoid CPP, getting CPP in order to get more GIS. That's not going to work because the amount of CPP is going to go up and catch you anyways. But the Canada Pension Plan is one of the forms of income where the GIS clawback, recovery rate, tax back, call it what you will, is going to apply. Investment income, again, 59%. And wage earnings after $5,000 a year. So the only exempted income from the GIS clawback is income from wages. Now that can mean whether you're employed or by a company, or if you're self-employed, then it's $5,000 a year. And it's a 50% recovery, only it doesn't creep up towards the 59%. And then honorariums, and again, we're going to get into honorariums a bit more later. We are going to see that the recovery rate is at the 59%. And an honorarium, if you have over $500 a year from one source for an honorarium, you will have you will receive a T4A, and there'll be a recovery rate of 59%. Now, it's really important to note that money you get from old age security itself does not suffer the recovery rate. It doesn't. So any money you get from old age security does not affect the amount of GIS you receive. So it's important to know that there's this tax back recovery rate on the guaranteed income supplement. The reason for it having this callback that starts from net income of zero for every other form of income other than earnings, and the 5,000 earnings exemption on earnings itself is because the GIS was originally brought in to help the government phase in the Canada Pension Plan. I guess, unfortunately, I won't try to reveal any biases here, but the recovery rate on the guaranteed income supplement is just a fact of life, and it occurs on all forms of income that people get who have incomes below the amounts that I showed you on the previous page, depending on your family configuration. And so part of what we're trying to do for low-income people is to configure our affairs in such a way that we do not suffer the GIS clawback. And so one of my chief recommendations that you're going to hear throughout these sessions, you're going to hear it next week, the week after, is to try to save. If you're going to save money and you have money to save, is to put it into a tax-free savings account. Why? When you take it out, nothing happens. It doesn't affect your guaranteed income supplement. But if you have money into an RRSP, than when you go to take it out, or when later, when even worse, at 71, you're forced to take it out under the RIF, then you're going to have that clawback in your guaranteed income supplement. If you receive it, again, you have to be low income to receive it, then it is going to affect that. And we're going to see how important that is as this discussion goes on. So let's go on to the next slide. So this is a slide that we're going to give to all of you, and it's especially for a certain type of person, and that is the person who likes graphs and likes to understand things through graphs. I am not going to go into it, but I do suggest that for any of you who likes to understand the math, you can take this graph that was done back in 2016, and it demonstrates why we have a 59% clawback. And I would suggest to those people who are algebraically and mathematically inclined that once you have run out of all the programs and movies and documentaries that you want to watch on Netflix on a Saturday night, you could take out these slides and put them on the kitchen table and again work through the math of this. But it won't be for everybody. It's just so it's there for you to have and to be able to show it to a student who's mathematically inclined, or again, someone who likes to understand things graphically. So let's move on to the next slide. Don't feel badly if you find this hard to read. So we already said in 2020, going back 4 years ago, that the earnings exemption, it was actually still when Jean-Yves Duclos was Minister of Employment and Social Development Canada, that the earnings exemption was raised from $3,500, which it had been for several years, up to the $5,000 level. Unfortunately, that $5,000 is not indexed. Had it been indexed, I mean, the benefit is indexed, but the earnings exemption is not indexed, which some of us in the policy world would think is somewhat inconsistent. But it went to $5,000, and at the same time, it didn't apply to the self-employed until 2020. And the tax back or clawback rates that can drift up to as high as 75%, but work out to 59% overall, it never goes above 50% when you're earning. So, for example, if you were to earn $5,000 in a year, because you're low income and you don't want to affect your GIS and you're only going to work the first couple of months in the year, you should also know that the next $10,000 you make, so if you're to earn $15,000, then then you're only going to see a reduction in your GIS of $5,000 if you earn $15,000, because you get the first $5,000 is exempted, and then it's 50% of the next $10,000. So people who want to work and make a bit of money as a senior and supplement their money can get a bit more advantageous tax back or clawback rate if they earn money as opposed to receiving it in other ways. Next slide, please.
John, if I may interrupt for 1 minute.
Yeah.
I'm just going to encourage people to, I've had some emails about I need a bio break, and I know we told people that or personal break. We told people that they could step away anytime they wanted. They don't want to miss a minute of what you're sharing. So if we may just take a 5-minute break for people to grab a glass of water or do what they need to do, are we okay with that?
Sure.
On to Tina's story. Well, I am going to welcome everybody back who may have stepped away, and we're going to let our expert, John Stapleton from Open Policy, continue with the case study. So over to you, John. Thank you.
Okay, so Tina's story is an example of how much you've retained, sort of a test, and a test for me in terms of did I get this information out to you properly, and secondly, how much. It's a very complex system. No, there is no sense in which the old age income security system is a simple system. It is a very, very complex and labyrinthine system. But Tina is a single mom who receives social assistance. So, one form of another, as a single mom from age 18 to 30. Remember how we have that window of 47 years between 18 and 65 where things, earnings count and residency count. Then she went back to school. She worked as a part-time nurse's assistant from age 30 to 50. And what I'm trying to tell you there is she probably didn't make the $60,000 a year to get full CPP. Then she became disabled with multiple sclerosis and received her income from the Ontario Disability Support Plan, which is non-taxable. And now Tina is turning 65. What will Tina get? So let's see how many of you, and again, you're only doing this yourself on your own time. So let's go to the next slide. What will Tina have at age 65? Now, her Canada pension plan, again, we're going to go in any particular order, but try to follow the order that we had before. Tina's Canada pension plan income is going to be $364 per month. But her maximum payout per month, of course, is the $1,364.60. So why does Tina getting $364 a month rather than the $1,364? Well, what your answer should be, your answer is, of course, that Tina didn't work all the time. She only worked for the 20 years out of the 47 years that she would generally be counting towards her Canada pension plan. There are exceptions to this, so I'm oversimplifying a bit. And of course, Tina did not pay into at the yearly maximum pensionable earnings. So there's two ways in which her CPP is docked. She only paid into it for a set number of years that was less than about half the years that she could pay in. And she was paying at a lower rate, so she only got $364. Now let's move over to old age security. Tina gets $727.67 a month, and the maximum payout for old age security is $727.67 a month. So what do we know about Tina is that she spent at least 40 of the 47 years between her 18th and 65th birthday in Canada. So she could have been an immigrant before she was 25, or she could be someone who was born here, and or a returning Canadian at a very young age. But in any event, she has 40 years leading up to her 65th birthday in Canada, so she gets the maximum amount. Now I'm going to skip a line for a moment and then go to the guaranteed annual income system, the gains payment. The maximum payout is $87 per month, but Tina got zero. Why did Tina get zero? Because her net income for GIS purposes, it's over $4,000 in a year. And if you have income of over $4,000 a year, you get no gains. And remember, the gains payment, you can't apply for it. It comes on, piggybacks on the guaranteed income supplement. And if your guaranteed income supplement is very high, then your gains payment will start to be paid. And if you have no income at all, you'll get the full $87. Now, Tina had income from savings of $10 a month, just a round figure here, and she got a private pension of $90 a month. So if we look at Tina's outside income that would affect her GIS, she has $364 in CPP, She has income from savings of $10 a month and a private pension of $90 per month. So Tina's outside income that would affect the GIS, other than OAS, is $464 a month, and $464 a month is going to be over $5,000 a year. So she's not going to get any money from the gain system, but her guaranteed income supplement is going to go down. And I looked at the tables online, and it goes down to about $767 a month. And that's because that of the GIS clawback. The recovery on the GIS is affected by her income from CPP, not old age security, but it's affected by CPP and her income from savings of $10 and her private pension of $90 a month that she got from when she was working. Now, Tina also gets refundable tax credits. What are they? Those are gift cards from government, and we're going to go into what refundable tax credits are in the next section in much more detail. But her refundable tax credits, now, where do they come from? Well, some of that might be climate. Some of it might be from the GST credit. Some of it might be from the Trillium credit. But when Tina puts the calculator, when I put this into the calculator for her income, I got about $200 a month that she was going to be getting in refundable credits. Now, one of the questions that you might have is, will those refundable credits of $198 a month affect her GIS? The answer, good answer, no. Refundable tax credits from the government do not affect your guaranteed income supplement. And so we are starting to come up with a bit of a list now of income forms that don't affect your guaranteed income supplement. We're up to 3. We know that our old age security money itself does not affect your guaranteed income supplement. We know that any money that you put in a TFSA and take it out, money that comes out of a TFSA, is not going to affect your guaranteed income supplement, again, if you're over 65. And also your refundable tax credits, your Trillium, your GSTC, your climate, all of those credits do not affect your GIS. And so here's Tina. Her total yearly income is just short of $26,000. Tina is right about the poverty line for York Region and the city of Toronto. It's very, very close to the poverty line. So Tina is either what we might say in very, very shallow poverty, but if she got a tiny bit more income from any source, she would probably be just out of poverty. So I wanted to give you the example of a person who would be right about on the poverty line. You also notice that Tina was in a wheelchair, which means she'll likely be eligible for a non-refundable credit called the disability tax credit. And we're going to get into that more. We have a whole session on the various different tax credits, which comes up in the last section of the series. So let's move on to the next slide now.
Sorry to jump on for 1 second, John. I just want to do a time check. We're at 2:40, and I think people are going to be hopping off at 3. So I'm not sure if that is that helpful information to go through the.
Yeah, let's try another 5 minutes with the slides. I'll slightly accelerate just a bit. The one thing I wanted to tell you about the form, when you apply for old age security and GIS, it used to be 2 separate forms. Now it's not. You just apply on one form, and there'll be a section there, and it's now been since 2019 when I gave these presentations before. There's widespread confusion because before you had to tick the box to get GIS, they reversed it and said, don't tick the box to get GIS. So we've got enough years now of the new form that just there's a tick in a box in the little graphic. So leave the box to the ticks. Don't tick the box. Don't worry about leaving the tick box empty because you want the government to tell you whether you qualify for GIS. You don't want to figure it out for yourself and therefore deprive yourself of an income source. And it's a complex calculation, and very few people can do it accurately. On my best days, I can do it, but I would say to most people, let them figure out whether you're eligible for GIS. And don't worry about the fact that when you sign your name, it says you could be charged under various different things for telling lies and giving false information. This is not one of those areas. If you're low income and you're anywhere near the GIS break-evens, those amounts I showed you earlier by family size and configuration, then just don't tick the box. Next slide, please. So there you are. Tick box on the OAS form. If you're low income, don't tick the box. If you're unsure, don't tick the box. No need to worry. Don't tick the box. Fill it out, answer all their questions. And in order to get guaranteed income supplement, if there's any of you out there listening to this and you don't file your taxes, you must file your taxes to get the guaranteed income supplement. They simply will not pay it to you unless you file your tax form each year. Next slide, please. So, application for the guaranteed income supplement and OAS. Send it to the right place. They got this long list on the form that have it, that the people we're generally speaking talking about have their postal code starting in LM or N. Make sure you send it to Scarborough, the Service Canada building. I live in Scarborough. The building is there. I see it at least once a week, so it's there, and they're still taking the applications. And the other one that postal codes that start with KRP, make sure that you send it to Timmins. Next slide, please. So, where is GIS not affected? So we were up to 3 before, and those 3 were old age security, tax-free savings account, cash outs, anything you take out of a tax-free savings account. And the third was the refundable tax credits you get with your income tax refund, your child benefits, Trillium, working income tax benefit, which is now called the Canada Workers Benefit. So I should probably change that on this slide. GST credits. The reason I don't change all these refundable tax credits on the slides, I'd be changing the tax. Government never tires of changing the names of these things. And so, I mean, it's like, I have no idea what the climate credit is called now. They keep changing the name of it. Anyways, there's my little complaint. But also add to that RDSP withdrawals, registered disability savings plan, for those people who get the disability tax credit and have an RDSP, a registered disability savings plan. If they take money out of an RDSP when they're over 65 and they're receiving GIS, it will not affect the GIS. Okay, so now we're up to 4 different forms of income that don't affect your guaranteed income supplement. So you can see where I'm leading you, and that's towards if you are a GIS recipient or if you're GIS bound. In other words, you're 60 years old or 56 and you're on that route that you know that at age 65 you're not, unless you're absent winning the lottery, that you're not going to have that sort of income. Then you should be thinking about having as much of your money in tax-free savings accounts where you really have a choice as possible. Next slide, please. So there we are. So we got to the end of it, and we got 13 minutes for questions, answers, and clarifications. And again, we'll try to, in the aftermath, we'll try to get to all of the questions, one way or another. So, here's
John.
Francis. Yeah.
Well, there are a number that relate to GIS, and maybe we could start with Can GIS be backdated?
11 months is all the federal government will give you. So in other words, let's say, and this I do in my main presentation, especially when I'm doing it in real life, I start playing Paul McCartney's song from Sgt. Pepper's. And his song on that album is When I'm 64. I think most of us remember that song. Will you still feed me? Will you still whatever, need me yet when I'm 64? Once you hear that song and people are sending a link to it to you on email or in Facebook or social media, rather than listening to the song, think to yourself, I have to apply for OAS. They take anywhere from 9 to 11 months to work out so that when you reach your 65th birthday, you will start receiving your old age security. Most people, that works out. The main area where it doesn't work out is if the federal government has any problem with your birth certificate or has any problem with in terms of information that they have, and they start sending you letters, not during a postal strike. They start sending you letters asking you, we have conflicting information. My own grandmother, bless her, it gave different dates. She has one on a birth certificate. She had another one on other pertinent information. And they asked her years ago, we don't really know what is your correct birthday. You have to work those things out in advance. So I'd even say if you're 50 or you're 40 or you're 60, whatever, is get on to any discrepancy that where we see this most of all is people who come from war-torn countries where records are hard to get. People can't get birth certificates. They can't get recognized legal documents. So that's when they start taking more time. Now, if you just wait till you're 65 to apply for old age security, you have waited too long. You should be getting it as at your 64 years and 1 month, get that application in there, and you're going to get your GIS on time. If there is a delay for whatever reason, a big delay is not filing your income taxes. So make sure you file your latest taxes. Then they will go back. So let's say you've turned 66, they will go back to 65 years and 1 month. So the short answer to the question is 11 months, and they won't go back further. For refundable credits, for disability tax credit, they will go back 10 years. They'll go back 12 years. They'll go back any number of years, but for benefits like this, they go back 11 months. Have they been charged in court, and have people taken them to court on that? I can't tell you the number of times they've been taken to court, but they've successfully defended their rule of only going back 11 months so far.
So you answered a couple GIS questions in the chat by answering it so fully. Thank you. There was another one related to GIS. Could my GIS go up if I stop getting a monthly payout for my RRSP?
Absolutely. If you stop your RSP, which you can do, what I advise people who are low income is actually to cash out all of your RRSP before you're 65. I would say to a 50-year-old who is not a lottery buyer and who knows that they don't have a pension and knows that that there's a good chance that they're going to be low income, and if they have a substantial RRSP, to start taking money out of it before they turn 65. Why? Because the amount of tax they're going to pay on it as a low income person is going to be a whole lot less than the 59% charge that GIS is going to take on it once you do turn 65. For people in that situation, I'm going to be telling them in the third session that they should take money out of an RSP and put it immediately into a TFSA if they have TFSA room, because when they take the money out of a TFSA, there will not be any GIS clawback. Then, of course, the immediate question was, well, then I'll have to pay tax on the on the money I'm taking out of my RRSP before age 65? My answer to that is yes, you will, but that tax will be so much less than the tax that will be charged on you once you turn 65 and start taking money out of an RRSP.
So, I feel like I don't want to fail a test here, but then what you're saying is you can transfer funds from things like an RIF or an LIF to a TFSA?
Well, it's not transferring it so much as it is taking money out of them. Now, all sorts of LIFs and LIRAs, locked-in retirement accounts, various something. You've probably signed an agreement with your employer or the supplier of that says that you won't take it out. So if you've made a legal agreement not to take the money out early, then the only way you could get it out is by, declaring bankruptcy or declaring hardship. Then you can get money out of these accounts. But generally speaking, usually there is some stipulations on LIFs and other, and especially LIRAs, because that's what they are, locked in retirement account. They used to be an Italian currency, but now liras are just locked in retirement accounts, and they're hard to get out of, but they're not impossible to get out of.
Well, I see we have 5 minutes left, and there's one question that might be a good one to end before we do our poll. How can I make sure that I'm getting what I'm entitled to?
The main reason, the main way to get what you're entitled to, number one would be to file your taxes every year and make sure that they're filed correctly. The Canada Revenue Agency and all the other agencies are very tied to the CRA, and so that's one really good way to do it. A second is to get advice, good advice. Generally speaking, you're going to get good advice if you can afford, or if you have a financial planner. Now, the banks and investment houses and individual financial planners generally will take people that have money to invest, usually somewhere in the $55,000 to $65,000 range is probably the lowest they're going to want to get into. However, there's a lot of financial planners who do pro bono work, people who have are trying to give back, and people who are financial planners and they're doing okay, they do that. My own advice is, if you have the funds, is to get an independent financial planner, somebody who has put their shingle up. In other words, they've declared themselves as an independent financial planner, because then that person is working for you. They're not working for the bank. They're not working for an investment firm. They're working for you. And when they're working for you, there's a lot of people who know this stuff very well. And they can give the proper financial advice, but they do have to have the letters behind their name to give that financial advice, or else the Ontario Securities Commission will get interested. So those are the ways to do it. And then I would say go to community programs. The ones I'm familiar with in Toronto are the FEPS program, the financial empowerment problem solving that you get through West Neighborhood House and in Wood Green Community Services in Toronto. But I'm sure that you have a list of agencies in York Region who do the same thing. And, that's where you're going to get your good advice. So 3 different places: through independent financial advisor, through the government itself, and then through the agencies, nonprofit agencies that do this sort of work.
John, this was sometimes like drinking through a fire hose, and the most delightful fire hose I've ever had a chance to drink through. You took very complicated things, you gave us lots of context for it, and have done such an amazing job at answering questions. Can't wait for the next session where you'll go into depth about some of the questions we didn't get a chance to address today. You'll see here for the participants, week 2, next Friday, same bat channel, understanding the personal income tax system Week 3, we're going to be talking about protecting your retirement income. Week 4, coming to Canada and leaving Canada. And week 5, tax credits and benefits for seniors and people with disabilities. This has been just wonderful. I really appreciate you taking us through this step by step. Again, thank you so much, John. After you have a chance to quench your throat there, and if you have any final words that you want to leave us with, I would invite you to have a closing statement or hashtag.
Yeah, I think what I'd really like to say is, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to do this to York Region. It's really important, and you're able to use your resources to get a lot of people out to it and to publicize it. The other main thing is that I started to touch on. It's almost impossible not to touch on some of the things that will be handled in the rest of the program. So it does give you a preview and a sense of what is going to be upcoming. I've already said to file your taxes. I've already said the importance of it in terms of one of the big things, of course, is you won't get any GIS if you don't. So there's a one. But we've also talked about protecting the importance of the TFSA versus the RRSP. We've already got into that. And there's some extra wrinkles along the way as that goes. And so, then in the last session, just that in many ways, it's going to be like sitting down and reading the encyclopedia or a dictionary, because we're just going to go through each and every one of those credits. And for some people, that not everyone applies, but, we're going to cover all of them and tell you what they're about. And that way you're really sort of ahead of the game by knowing them. So, that's it. Thanks. And thanks very much for this opportunity.
And right at 3:00. You're wonderful. Have a great weekend, everybody, and thank you for coming. We'll get to your questions along the series, and have a great day.